Hey, this is the C'est La Vie podcast, and I'm Laura,
I'm Sebastian.
and we're here to talk about the making of the web series C'est La Vie.
Yes, we are.
Yep.
I'm excited.
That's good. Me too.
Yeah, episode 1.
Episode 1. We'll talk about episode 1, which is called Say Kate. So, like, the series is C'est La Vie.
Right.
Every episode starts with
Say.
which means this is in French. I really
Tell us a little bit about the name, though. C'est la vie. What does that mean?
The name C'est La Vie means sort of like this is life, or that's how it is. People say it, that's life,
Right.
that kind of way. And so that's kind of what's happening in the series. But for this podcast, we're going to do the opposite of that. We're going to tell people how something's done.
How it's all done.
How it's all done. So we're going to talk about, hopefully it'll help other people who want to make either
Web series
or film, short films, whatever. Help them make what they want to make.
Cool. So, let's get into it.
All right. Episode 1. Say Kate.
Say Kate.
So we introduce the Beaufort family, starting with Kate.
Kate.
Main protagonist of this web series. We will hopefully go on further in the series, and the family itself will show up in a bigger way with their own storylines. But right now, in this web series, we are going to follow mostly Kate.
Kate, and then her family.
Her family, yeah. But every episode, the revolving theme is going to be around Kate.
Right. She's our lead.
Yes.
And then we have Olivier, her husband.
Right.
And then her 2 kids.
Well, yes, but she actually has 3.
3 kids, that's right. But one of them's overseas.
Right.
From,
if we go into the backstory of the Kate.
Marriage.
A previous marriage for Kate.
Right.
And should we pause for the dogs growling, or should we keep going?
A ground hum.
Yeah.
It's like 60 hertz. You can just like take out the dog growl.
I think you should put them out. Dogs out.
Dogs out.
So, but we ABR, always be rolling.
Always.
Who
You know
knows?
what's funny is because we shot
this
this entire thing with the dogs outside.
Yes.
And there were moments where we had to hold for dog bark.
Right. We shot the whole web series. Well, not the whole web series. Not every episode.
The majority.
But the majority of this is the Beaufort house in California. And this is, that happened during the filming. Yep. And this happened in episode 1.
Yeah.
So there was a different wall here. I almost left it here for our podcast. But it was a wall that was put up, a fake wall that was painted complimentary and designed so that Kate could tear down a wall.
Right.
Because she decides in episode 1 she needs a change. And that's where we meet her. That's where we meet the character. We meet the character at a point in her life where she is feeling really frustrated. And she is in a midlife crisis, I guess. She's in midlife and she's really facing a lot of things. And she's wanting to make a lot of changes. And so she starts by making what she thinks these little changes that are going to help her is by changing her home, her scenery. And so by the end of the episode, she is tearing out a wall. And unfortunately, me, the actor playing Kate, when I decided to hit that fake wall, I went a little hard.
So the fake wall was about, this thick, right?
Yeah.
Of like drywall.
It was a couple inch frame and then a regular whatever.
Thing of drywall.
So what is that? Half of an inch thick of drywall.
And you were just taking a hammer to it, or?
Yeah. I don't remember if I had a sledgehammer or did I have one of those.
I think you had like a pickaxe?
Pickaxe
no, it
type
wasn't
thing?
a pickaxe. Couldn't have been. Maybe a sled. I think it was a sledgehammer.
But I was coming down at it, and I went too hard. That's why I thought it was a pickaxe type of thing. But maybe it was just a sledgehammer.
Maybe a little thing.
Wow.
But you went all the way through.
It wasn't that long ago, but I don't remember.
That was a cool scene from behind the scenes, because we had 3 cameras shooting that scene.
Yeah.
That one shot, right, was a multi-cam, and this was primarily a single cam shoot, this entire web series.
Yes. My dream goal is to get this series into having at least 2 cameras on set.
Right. Sitcom,
next season.
very...
Right. Or, I mean, I'd love a full multicam. And I don't mean multicam the way they used to do it. I'm not saying we're going to do it and then we're going to run the show, you know, the way it's shot, where you, on Monday, you have your table read and you go through it, and then at the end of the week you film it and you have a live audience, and I don't want all that. But I want to use the multicam technique that was invented for sitcom, to be able to catch all those great moments and reactions without, okay, let's reset and get your...
Right, stopping that momentum of the actors. Because, exactly. Like, comedy really just lives in the actors and how they present it and everything. And so, I agree. I think for comedy specifically, you need to have multiple cameras, multiple angles for that exact reason. Those reactions from others, right? That's what makes things funny is watching how people react to, as well as, of course, the joke.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. And so then, and especially like if you have any form of little improv that happens or a moment that happens, you can't often recreate that. And then if you've lost someone's reaction. But I also like the idea, I mean, as a filmmaker, I like the idea of having more than one camera on a lot of things, because you can get so much coverage.
Right. I mean, we were just talking about, you know, that one scene, Succession, in that season 4 of that giant, the funeral, right? And how they were talking about, they shot all of Succession, majority of it single cam, but that one was so logistically a nightmare that they had 8 different cameras in that for that one scene, because they had to get through so much of the script and so many different little moments that they had to hit. So that's exactly where that comes into play, right? You can get through much more, much quicker.
Right. But in a situation like this, if you're wanting to make your own production, there's a couple things that's problematic with it being multicam in this small web series. One, this web series was made by the grace of God, of lovely people like you and so many other people who, some were fairly new at what they were doing, some were more veteran, but it was people getting together and deciding, we want to do this, we want to get this out there so that we can hopefully keep pushing it forward.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of people giving heart and soul and not a lot of money behind it.
Totally.
But so the problem with having more than one camera is you have two things. You either have to have more than one person have the time to give up to be on set all the time. Or if you have budget, you have to pay twice as much for 2 DPs, or at least a main DP
and a crew.
Camera ops, your B-roll, all that kind of stuff. So when we rolled this on 3 cameras, we had our main Blackmagic camera,
for sure,
but the other 2 were DLSRs.
Yes,
which is different in
the
film
world. We had a couple
world.
of Sonys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so we do have this in a lot of different footage. And right now where we're at in the process, we're in editing. So episode 1 through 4 the editor is working. I have 2 people editing. They're working on episodes 1 through 4. The way we're doing this is the people who directed do have different styles of how they work with the editor. But episode 1 through 3 was all directed by Renata Green-Gaber. And Renata likes to go through her footage, give notes, turn it over with notes and footage to the editor. I reviewed those a little bit, but as producer and writer. But right now I'm waiting to see what the outcome is. So I don't know how much
like
of what camera
the editor's cut or like the director's cut kind of
first rough cut.
Rough cut.
I'll wait to see that. So with episode 4, it was a different director. It was Ro. What she wanted to do was cut it herself.
Right.
So she chose to take the footage, cut it herself, and then pass it to me and the editor and say, hey, what are your notes?
Gotcha.
We sent back notes, and then yesterday I got back another version. I haven't watched it yet, but it has
exciting.
It has a lot of notes back from her about what her choices were, and asking, what we think. So.
And what do you, in terms of like workflows, right? Different directors, different styles of getting it to edit. What do you personally, as the person receiving the rough cut, and adjusting and making critiques and so on and so forth, what do you personally like more? What do you think works better? What do you think is, are there aspects of both different workflows that you're like, ooh, I like that, but I wish I had?
Well, in a situation like this, so if you're on a big set and you've got money and you've got people that have their regular jobs, those directors often just send it directly to the editor with no notes and let the editor take the
That's what I was under the impression. That's how it all
but
worked.
you're not going to do that on a small shoot because your editor probably isn't experienced enough to give you what you're looking for. Also, in reality, someone like Ron Howard has a specific editor he's working with all the time.
Who also knows the story and has the script, you know, in pre-production before they even shoot anything.
Right. So he has a lot of more information.
Right.
My editor gets the footage at the end. He gets a script. I tell him, hey, we're shooting this. This is what we're going to do. So I don't give a lot of freedom to that in terms of here's just the footage, make your cut. Also, this is a show, not a movie. So with a show, writers and what we write are what the story is. All shows are that way. If you notice, when you watch shows, there's very few that are directed by the same director top to bottom.
Right.
Almost all shows have multiple directors because the writers are the showrunners. So in this case, writing it, show running it, and also producing it, I'm holding
and acting,
but for the bottom line of the production, I'm holding the information of how that needs to look versus maybe a movie where a director has their own script and is bringing it forward. Then they're going to make all those decisions. But so like let's just give an example. Let's say Renata was making her own film and I came on to produce with her and acted in it. She would take her footage, send it to her editor, and I'd have nothing to do with any viewing of it or anything. Most producers don't have any kind of say.
Right.
You know, it depends. I mean, sure, certain studios watch footage. They usually interrupt the production before it gets to editing. They're like, oh, we don't want that actor. We don't see this vision, whatever. They'll
like
give
big
notes.
studios.
Big studios.
Yeah, that have
They'll give
control.
Notes. They'll give notes when they have control. But as a producer at a smaller level, producing independent film, usually your filmmaker often is your director. Even if they didn't write the script, it might be a script that they got from a writer. And they're going to make those decisions. And the producer who's kind of helping manage the project and paying or paying for the project or providing something towards the project isn't usually the one reviewing footage. In this case, the project was ours. So my co-writer Deborah and I wrote it. The project was ours. So we brought it.
Right.
So we're going to monitor it. So in this case, I am reviewing the footage.
Yeah, I heard something, you know, that commercials were the producer's medium, TV shows were the writer's medium, film, like narrative film, was the director's medium, and live theater was the actor's medium. And like kind of who's the most in control of, you know, these different art forms, different mediums of.
That's true.
Media.
I mean, in my experience, that's true. But I'd go beyond, for commercials, I would actually say it's not even the producer's medium. It is, but it's really the client's medium. So in my production company, I've made commercials. And that's one thing, Renata actually directed all of those. And she said, hey, one of the things I learned here was as a director of those, I've never directed commercials before. I really realized it's not my artistic vision at all. I'm here to fulfill exactly what they want and need in this commercial. And I can make these choices, but ultimately the owner of the commercial, in this case, the clients that hired us to make it, they might have to go and say, I don't like the way that was done or that said, or let's fix that. And it's true.
Because that's interesting, you know, like with commercial, you're trying to, you know, sell a product, sell something, get eyes somewhere, whatever. And I think the difference there is, you know, it's more marketing than it is, you know, it's a commercial's a marketing tool instead of a storytelling narrative or show or whatever, you know. It's more of a business corporate side of things instead of the creative art side of things. And I think I personally haven't done a commercial, but would be interesting.
You acted on one of the ones.
I've acted in it, but I've never, directed or
Right.
been part of the crew for one.
Right.
So that'd be interesting. But
let's talk about episode 1 of C'est La Vie.
Yeah, switching gears. Yeah.
Yeah.
So episode 1, it kind of starts with a bang, quite literally and figuratively. We have Kate, our lead character. I think for me, reading the first episode, I was like, wait, what is happening? Right? You don't know what is going on in her mind, because she kind of starts off quite quickly. She gets into a freak out moment where she's super warm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
she's having a hot
She's
flash.
having a hot flash. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Right? And so I'm reading this. I'm like, she jumped in the pool.
Why is she jumping
why
in the
is
pool?
she jumping in the pool? Because we don't know that until, later in that scene.
In her clothes.
In her clothes.
In the middle of the day. In front of a contractor.
In front of a contractor. Someone brand new who... Yeah. What a funny character. Such a small little part. The contractor's part. But so funny.
Yeah.
He's got his little, moment with his kid that's...
He's manifesting a baby. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. When I was reading that, I'm like, what is going on here? But at the same time, having, engaged with that type of person in my life growing up, I quickly understood where we were going with that.
With
so that was funny.
manifestation.
Oh yeah. But as putting on your actor's hat here, how do you, what was going on in Kate's mind, or what was going on before, our moment before we start episode 1, what's going on in her life that was kind of causing this turmoil, if you will, deciding to, renovate her house by herself and moving around the furniture. What's going on in that character's mind?
Well, I would say our log line for the show. So we wrote this as a regular sitcom or dramedy show. We started out at 30-minute. We expanded it to 50-minute. We might take it back down to 30-minute. We haven't decided, but we have a main show that's not a web series that we were shopping around town. And we wrote Kate. What we like to say in the log line is turning 50 was not happy for Kate. And so what's wrong with Kate is Kate hit a moment in her life where all the normalcy changed almost overnight. Like, here I am, this is the way my life goes. I feel this way. I belong to this. I do this. And suddenly she got to a point where because of her own hormonal changes, suddenly her life began to feel very irrelevant. She's suddenly realized her age. And what does this mean? You know how people say, oh, you're over the hill or whatever. What does this mean to be on the other side? Like, I'm closer to death now than I was to birth. So you hit 50 and you're like, I'm hoping I'm making it to 100. I hope I got another 50 years.
Right.
Right?
Perfect world.
Right. So you're at this point in your life where all of a sudden your hormones are changing. And so that, for me, I'm in that same mental space, and I'm like, well, Kate just can't deal with it at all. Like, she's in a space where she just cannot wrap her head around how to deal with feeling this way. Yeah. So she is doing absolutely everything she can to change everything to stop feeling that way.
Yeah, it definitely, at first glance, at first read through, it came off like she's kind of manic in a way, right? Mm-hmm. And that came through totally. But then throughout episode 1, you kind of understand a little more of what's actually going on. And I don't know, for me, when I first saw it on its feet as you guys were all acting it kind of had some feeling of like she's kind of alone in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Her kids are growing up, her husband's off working, what is her you know, what you said, comfort or kind of normal, you know, is totally changing. And we get into it definitely in the different, throughout the season, you know, through the different episodes. But I've kind of felt bad for Kate, and she's kind of alone. She's alone in her house all the time. You know, of course, her husband comes home and she's in the pool. And that's, you know, super funny. But I found myself kind of behind the camera feeling kind of sorry. I wanted to, you know, reach out and give her a hug.
Give Kate a hug. Well, I think that's the reality, is that that it's the same for kids going through puberty. It's like you do need to give them a hug sometimes. I think it's like it's suddenly a shocking change that prior to my generation, I don't remember anybody talking about it. I remember calling people going, "What's happening to me? Why am I feeling this way? Why didn't anybody tell me this was going to happen?" And I'm a Gen Xer, and I have to tell you, Gen Xers are being quite loud about it now. I don't think anybody talked about it, but now Halle Berry's at the White House saying there's not enough medical research on menopause, and why aren't we taking care of women? You know, you have Courtney Cox making a funny TikTok about, I think one of the first things she did was when maybe it was a tampon commercial she did when she was younger, like 20. And then suddenly she has this TikTok about menopause. So there's like all these people coming out and speaking about it, telling the truth, which nobody did. Because listen, Meryl Streep's older than us, and she wasn't out there as an actor forging the way to speak about it in public, right? Nothing against her, but that generation, the boomers, were not talking about it. Gen X is like, we're going to talk about it because this is too weird. We're going to talk about it. And so I think people do need a hug sometimes. Kate does.
I definitely felt that. I was like, you know, I was definitely, as a guy and everything, you know, it's hard for me to relate to what the symptoms of menopause are.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, she's so sad, you know? But I do, however, remember a very funny moment when filming episode 1. And that was our towel.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember about this towel? You want to talk a little bit about the towel?
So I do. Kate, obviously, we make it a point to be like, this isn't the first time Kate went in the pool, right? From her heat. So the husband brings out a stack of towels. And he brings out a stack of towels, and I'm dripping wet, and I grab a towel and start to towel off. Cut. We're going to shoot it again.
You got to jump back in the water.
Pool.
Yep.
And then we're like, the towels are all different. They weren't all the same color. They were pool towels, all different. Right. We have to keep them in the same order, and we have to keep folding up this damp, eventually wet towel.
Sopping wet at the end.
To put it in the same spot on top for Kate to grab it, because we couldn't dry it in between, and it was the only one of that color. So what's a big lesson learned? 2 big lessons. When you make the fake wall, make it more than a couple inches away from your real wall. Make it thick. Like put something behind it so you don't hit your real wall, which now I have to remodel. Lesson number 2, make sure all your towels are the same color.
Right, have the same towels so you can just interchange them.
Yes. Now we only got 1 jump in the pool. I would be willing to shoot that again.
Would you?
Yes, because we got 1 jump, so we get 1. We only can use that
from
take
dry to wet.
From dry to wet. But I looked at the footage, and I didn't love the distance that they shot it at. I'd like to go around and get it, so I would shoot it.
See, there would be another place to do a multicam.
Right.
You have 1 take, you know, from dry to wet. You would want multiple cameras, multiple angles.
Right.
That'd be fun. We could totally do that again.
Yes, we could. We
just got to remember the towel sequence.
We don't need to shoot that part, though. We don't need the towel. We just need to shoot the run and jump into the pool from a slightly different angle, a little bit closer than we did it, and get it.
That's
a different,
pretty applicable.
Like a cut to version. And that's another thing. As not being a director, that I learned on set is a lot of times I'd be wondering, the director would say, that's okay, I got enough footage to cut to. And they do a lot of little insert shots and stuff. And I always thought, who cares about the insert, right? I used to think this as the actor.
Yeah.
Who cares about me picking up the coffee cup and sending
the close-up of that.
The close-up of that.
Yeah.
But in reality, they sometimes need to cut away to cut back in if something didn't work, lighting-wise, acting-wise, whatever. And instead of trying to go a whole nother take, so that you don't have to worry about one whole take.
Right, yeah. If there's just a section, right, you can cover that section with an insert. Mm-hmm. And I think it also, especially like when watching from an audience perspective, it keeps it dynamic. It keeps the scene moving, especially if you're going for the extreme close up of the coffee cup or whatever it is. It's not just I speak, you speak, cut to you, cut to me, cut to you, cut to me. Here's our 2-shot, It keeps it more fun for our eyes to track, especially.
Yeah, which, by the way, I don't love. I don't love when people are talking and it's my face, your face, my face, your face.
Do I.
I don't love that. It's a thing that's done a lot. I don't love it. But I will tell you what I did love. I loved Bradley Cooper's film Maestro. Oh, yeah. I loved that darn wide shot fight. And I know people don't in general, don't think about filming this way. I loved that argument and I loved the angle of the camera. And then afterwards, when they said that they did it that way because I think it was Bradley Cooper remembered as a child watching his parents argue, you're not watching their faces. Yeah. The perspective is here.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, maybe that's why that affected me so much because
it felt like
it felt real. Yeah, it felt like I was witnessing a real fight.
I remember that very vividly that you bring that up from that. That's an amazing
scene. And I'll tell you, we were talking about multicams earlier, and Zone of Interest did something really well, and really, really interesting. And I feel like he also had 8 cameras, but now I can't really remember. But you could actually, there is a TikTok where he's being interviewed, the director, and he's being interviewed. And what they did was they set up cameras around the house that they built.
Oh, wow.
So they built a replica of that house next to Auschwitz. Did you see Zone of Interest?
I did, of course.
Okay. So they put cameras around
so that they can keep moving throughout.
They didn't move the cameras.
No, I know the actor. Can move throughout.
And they didn't have a bunch of people on set.
That's
so I don't know how they function the cameras. Like I don't know. I've not seen anything really into the weeds. That's all he said. I'm curious to know, were the cameras like behind a wall and like the
frame of something? Yeah, picture frame.
And then somebody was back there operating it. How were they operating them? Were they just turning them on and
walking
away?
I would love to see some behind the scenes stuff of that.
Right.
I didn't know that.
All that movement is continuous movement. It was filmed like
that's so play. Interesting because it really did feel, especially in that house, going upstairs, downstairs, bathroom, wherever. That felt really cool. First thing that came to mind was one of the servant girls was like pouring like a shot of vodka for his celebratory speech or whatever. Right. And she's just moving throughout this like a super long shot. And I mean, it's not a long shot, like one take, but it's, she's moving throughout. But it
technically is.
But exactly.
Because it was multiple cameras picking up her movement.
I loved it because it looked so fluid and so nice.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So I think that
talk about a set
really cool.
too.
Yeah.
Having a proper, place to shoot something like that is really cool.
Yeah, shooting in your own home
it's fun.
It's fun. And if you want to make your own projects, which I highly recommend. I can't tell actors, directors, whatever part of the business you're in. I don't care. You want to be a lighting grip. Go find other people who are doing other things. Get a group together and make your own stuff, because when I first started, a lot of people were making their own stuff, but it was expensive. You had to buy film.
Right.
And then DSLR came in and people were starting to do that. It didn't look as good. But now even the iPhone looks good. So make your own stuff.
Yeah. What was I hearing? I heard something like, it's so like storage, like digital storage is so cheap compared to like film and getting film processed. Yep. And you're watching your dailies the next day. And with film, truly only the DP kind of knows what image is going to come out of that camera. right? Like the director can't look at a monitor so much and be like, oh, see that continuity error. You know, you're kind of at the mercy of that cinematographer, that DP's eye. And I think the argument was made that with digital camera and digital video, that part of the cinematographer's job was kind of taken away, right? There was this trust between your director and your cinematographer. And that part of that trust has been taken away now that digital is mainstream, because the director can see and can change on the fly, and it can't edit it.
Right. Right. But I'm waiting for the day when I'm big enough to go back to film.
I know. Don't get me wrong. My favorite director is Christopher Nolan.
And he's to shoot some film.
Strictly on film.
Okay, so
IMAX cameras, 70 millimeter film.
Yeah. And Spielberg shoots on film.
Those two directors single-handedly keep the film.
Okay. So have you heard about this? The film house that was going to close.
Yeah, right.
And Nolan, Spielberg, I believe Scorsese, some other directors got, I believe Coppola, got together and promised a order each year of so much film
to keep them afloat.
To keep that film factory afloat, to keep producing film for film cameras. And
I heard that. That gives me chills.
I'm just waiting to be able to shoot on film.
Me too.
I don't have the money to shoot on film.
I've got a 1950s like Super 8 film camera that I own.
Let's make a film.
With that, just like a Super 8 film. Let's do it. I want to do it so bad.
Let's do it. Well, okay, so lessons learned in episode 1. We got it. What else did we do in episode 1? Well, it was mostly here in the house, and it was that, and then the wall at the end, to not give too much away. But yeah, I think that day it was knowing what you needed to film when, because the most important part was once I went in the pool, I was going to be wet.
Yeah, right.
And so I was going to have to, so everything we filmed, every angle, take, whatever, dry.
Yeah.
Until I went in the pool. And then I went in the pool. We got those shots off, called lunch, so that I could go blow dry my hair to do the nighttime scenes.
See, that's exactly... So for my first ever short film that I did, I had the same kind of scenario where my lead character gets pushed into a pool. Now, when I had, all my friends, whatever, volunteering to be there, you can't mess that up. Right? If you don't have if you have to know that everything that while your character's dry has been shot through and shot out, so you're good to get that person wet. In our case, you. Mm-hmm.
Especially if they have long hair. And
yeah. Yeah. No, it was crazy.
Makeup.
Fortunately, we decided to, once he's wet, he's wet for the rest of the film.
Right.
So. That was the other thing. We were shooting, and he dried off, so we had to jump back in the pool. I jumped
back in the pool.
Yeah, I know. I remember.
Because that's the thing is your clothes don't look so wet.
Yep.
And I see that in films, and it frustrates me when I see the characters' clothes drying.
Totally.
And they didn't go back and wet it again because they now are their hair's drying, and it's like, get that actor wet again. You're in actual production.
Yeah.
Why aren't you getting the actor wet again?
You see that? I see that quite often.
Yeah. Well, and I see a lot of stuff in
that's true.
Short films because I work on a film festival and I run my own script writing contest, and I see a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. That it's like, just take that little extra bit. You know, of course I was producing my own short, so I knew as an actor, get back in the pool.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Go ahead and you got to get wet again. You're going to come up into the scene. They're going to keep reshooting the scene where I walk up dripping wet. I better be dripping wet and not half dry. Mm-hmm. So I went in multiple times.
Yeah, totally.
I did heat the pool, of course.
Well, that's good.
That's good.
I didn't actually know that.
I did heat the pool. It wasn't fully heated, though, because I didn't turn it on till that morning.
Ooh.
But it was better than getting into a cold pool. Yes. Yes.
Well, that's good.
Because we shot in February.
Yeah, I was going to say, this was winter time.
This was not a summer shoot.
No.
But it was, people are more available for giving me their free time in February than they are in the summer.
This is true, right. Right after December.
Right.
After Christmas. New
Year's.
And
people are, it's a little slow. It's like, come on, people. And, I actually benefited from the industry being slow, I believe. Because I had so many actors. So many actors show up for our auditions and everything and just love it and fun. Be happy to be working. But
well, and that was the whole, and correct me if I'm wrong, the whole idea behind the web series, right, was what do we do in this time during the writer's strike?
Right. We write a web series.
What do you do? And I think even that part of the story, right, of the creation of C'est La Vie is really, really cool because that touches home for so many actors, so many writers, so many, studios, production company, everywhere, right? Everyone was affected by it. And I think that's really, really awesome that you guys took that time, right? Okay, well, we're forced to stop. So what do? Don't stop.
We were stuck. We couldn't pitch our actual project. As writers and the Writers Guild being on strike, I'm not a member of the Writers Guild. I'm a member of SAG, but I still could not cross a picket line to pitch my act.
Right.
So my pitching stopped. Once pitching stopped, what do we do with our time? We write a web series. I'm
as a prequel.
SAG as a prequel, and then I'm SAG and I'm an actor. Now what do I do with my time? There's no real acting jobs. I can shoot my own stuff though because I can get a SAG contract.
Right.
Which, by the way, I ended up actually going into production after the strike ended. Right. It did end.
True.
But that wasn't, I didn't plan it that way. Basically, on how the timing worked out, we ended up...
Well, because we were in pre-production during the strike.
Right. And we were able to get our SAG contract, regardless of strike or not, would have been approved because we weren't one of the companies... what we were doing wasn't one of the problems.
Right.
That's not what we were striking about, so... But yeah, so that's episode 1. Say Kate. Everybody gets to meet Kate and the Beaufort family.
I look forward to seeing the final product, right?
That's great. Well, then everybody has to follow us on YouTube.
Absolutely.
For this and for the show.
Oh, yeah, when the show comes out.
Right? So, and we're going to put this podcast out at about the same time. So everybody gets to watch the show and listen to the podcast. And so then now this is episode 1. So I'm assuming... Episode 1 just came out.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
So now you got to stay
that's true.
Subscribe to watch the podcast and that, or just follow for the podcast. Follow us on any of the podcast platforms.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun.
That was a good day. It was
fun.
That
was fun.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later on episode 2.
Episode 2.
All right.
Later.
Bye.
Cut. That's a